DIBELS is the dynamic indicator of basic early literacy skills, designed to provide teachers with immediate feedback on student learning so they can provide adequate support for each student to successfully meet grade level reading expectations. The purpose is to identify and progress monitor students who are unlikely to meet the state standards. DIBELS was developed based on measurement procedures for curriculum-based measurement starting in the late 1980s by Dr. Ruth Kaminsky and Dr. Roland Good. Both authors of DIBELS have over 20 years of educational experience, mostly in research behind the psychology of developing readers. DIBELS is comprised of 7 scores that are purposed to give the administrator a deep understanding of a student's early reading skills and help to pinpoint areas that might need intervention. The benchmark assessments are administered to the whole class 3 times per year, and progress monitoring components are used with at-risk students as needed. As shown in the figure, the progression of DIBELS gets more in-depth and focuses more on comprehension as the student progresses in their academic career. A key aspect of all the areas assessed is fluency. DIBELS builds in a logical sequence of assessing starting with initial sounds and focusing more on a child's ability to comprehend. Many educators that use DIBELS say that it makes it easier to teach with the odds in your favor. DIBELS is a type of dynamic language assessment which seeks to identify the skills that an individual child possesses, as well as their learning potential. DIBELS was developed based on years of research in order to pinpoint specific early reading skills. DIBELS is a criterion reference test that links reading fluency content and measurements of a student's achievement of that content. The scores of DIBELS are individualized and usually based on predetermined baseline scores for students in the school. DIBELS gives an individual picture of the skills a student does and does not have in reading. DIBELS has been used to successfully identify students who are at risk for reading failure and as a means of progress monitoring. DIBELS evaluates a set of early literacy skills directly related to reading competence. DIBELS is replicable and sensitive to growth and change over time for specific groups of students. DIBELS has consistent predictive validity and is a reliable indicator of how students will perform on state and nationally mandated tests. Sections of DIBELS that showed the most predictive and concurrent validity were oral reading fluency, nonsense word fluency, phonemic segmentation fluency, and initial sound fluency. DIBELS is administered 3 times a year as a benchmark assessment and as needed for progress monitoring. The efficiency of DIBELS makes it ideal for quick checks of students that educators expect in need of interventions. The tests are given in short, 1-minute fluency measures to monitor reading skills. DIBELS can be administered by anyone trained in the DIBELS testing measurements. DIBELS is used mostly by classroom teachers and trained professionals such as school psychologists that use DIBELS in their psychological evaluations and student IEPs. It is then up to them how they will use the data to drive instruction, create interventions, and pinpoint disabilities. Each test can be administered to an individual child in 1 to 3 minutes. Examiners must time each measure overall and follow guidelines for time limits on responses to the prompts. Most of the tests have 20 alternate forms, allowing teachers to evaluate struggling readers frequently without dangers of contamination. This is an example of DIBELS given to a first grader focusing on the section known as nonsense word fluency. The student is able to sound out letters but struggles in the area of blending. This quick assessment can give teachers an overview of skills that need to be addressed in order to develop intervention goals on an individual level. Examiners must interpret and record student responses. The scoring guide gives specific instructions about which part of a student's response should be counted as correct. Examiners make mathematical calculations and compare scores with locally developed percentile ranks. Schools can, for a fee, enter student data into the DIBELS website for a report. Teachers, administrators, reading coaches, and school districts all use the data collected from the administration of DIBELS. Teachers can use DIBELS as a quick check or benchmark check to see where individual students need assistance and how to drive instruction as a whole group. Administrators and reading coaches can use DIBELS to pinpoint students that might need reading interventions. Instructional interventions are suggested for students who score within the local percentile ranks of 40 or less. DIBELS is used to identify students who are at risk and in need of reading interventions. The different skills assessed help to pinpoint specific reading skills that need improvement based on the student's assessment performance. DIBELS is directly aligned with corresponding Common Core state standards for ELA. The DIBELS assessment is indirectly aligned with at the substrand level of Common Core state standards. This means that teachers can assess their students, look at what areas need to be addressed, and drive instruction using standard-based instructional methods. Some strengths of DIBELS include that it is not lengthy, time-consuming, and can give the administrator a wealth of potential knowledge about the student's reading abilities. DIBELS is tailor-made for many of the reading first requirements for benchmark assessments for low-performing schools. It can be purchased inexpensively or even without charge, and the results have practical classroom uses. Because the actual DIBELS assessment is so new in relation to more research assessments, there's not a lot of research to support DIBELS that is done internally. The scoring of DIBELS is not reliable, and the validity for the described purposes of the assessment is inadequate. There are gaps in measuring reading comprehension and vocabulary knowledge. DIBELS needs to be researched more. DIBELS is enforced in many schools based on the No Child Left Behind Act and in any school receiving a Reading First grant. Each student is required starting in kindergarten to be assessed, and because DIBELS involves a set of tasks that progressively gets harder, if a student does not excel in the beginning, they are set up for failure. It is timed and does not allow for students to have thoughtful responses. This presentation was created using a reliability and validity study used in a school psychology review, as well as information from the actual DIBELS website created by the DIBELS author. Examples of the DIBELS tests were borrowed from a teaching blog, and images were used from research sources. Thank you.